Today, we're working with context for what turns on the ons and what turns off the offs and how we can work with that. And Emily Nagoski is a wonderful writer. She's got lots of presence on the internet as well. She was interviewed actually along with her sister by Brene Brown, talking about her next book from this. But she has a podcast. She's got a newsletter. She's got many resources on her website as well. So if you're interested in this topic, it's a great resource. And then also Deb Dana and her work and Stephen Porges and everybody who's working with the polyvagal system and how this has so much to do with how we tune in and how we experience sexual pleasure as well. Not to forget those parts of it, that we're always working with that as well. So one of the things that Emily's talking about in terms of the brain science around that is we have these 3 brain pleasure or reward centers that are intertwined in the old parts of the brain. So they're separate functions. So we have an enjoying system. We notice if it feels good. If it feels good, how good. If it feels bad, how bad. So that's one part of this 3 intertwined functions. The expecting, and I think this would be the part where we could have a lot of inquiry. So we link what's happening now to what we think should happen next. And this is the conditioning, the implicit learning. So this is unconscious and it's based on our past. So one of the things I was thinking about with this one is we could be expecting that if we have a certain type of sexual activity that we are going to have an orgasm because that's what we've been conditioned to believe should happen. And then if it doesn't happen, then we feel bad about ourselves somehow. We feel like we're failing. Or we might be expecting that we will always have a real heartfelt making love connection with our partner. Sometimes we're not connected enough within our own self to have that happen, or maybe they're not. So there's a lot of different conditioning. And if we're looking at the arousal in terms of context, a lot of this conditioning is what really affects our experience of this. And then the feeling of eagerness, how eager are we to move towards? And it's that seeking affection or stimulation, and then moving away, seeking safety. So again, we're working with our primitive brain, our nervous system, and that unconscious, the neuroception, the unconscious perception of those 2 factors. We have a survival drive to connect with other people. And as children, we need that in order to have food and housing and safety to survive, literally. And we've also had experiences of being hurt by people, physically, emotionally, all kinds of different ways. And when we're talking about sexually, especially for women, we live in a rape culture. And so we might be wanting to feel safe enough to relax in another's arms, as Stephen Porges puts it. And at the same time, we might have a lot of fear and anxiety in our body. Wherever you are on, the complexity of how we work with these are the 3 systems that work together. And then we've talked a little bit about this, the balance or the imbalance between the brakes and the accelerator. So when we're looking at the context of pleasure, what we're trying to do is set up a good context. So we're trying to have as few off signals as possible and as many on signals as possible. So when we're looking at the imbalance, some people have a highly sensitive accelerator. So there's a lot of things that we might notice that might be sexually stimulating to us, and we don't have much for brakes. So nothing much is inhibiting that. Some of us have a low sensitivity accelerator, so we don't really notice much that's sexually stimulating unless the context is really good. But we have highly sensitive brakes. So what that might look like in our life would be that it takes a lot of concentration, and things have to be pretty much perfect in order for us to really start to tune in and to start to enjoy any kind of sexual activity, whether that's with ourselves or with a partner. And that the sensitive brake is the strongest predictor of sexual problems. And that really makes sense because it's not as much the stimulation part, what it is that turns us on isn't usually the problem with sexual inhibition. It's usually that there's too many things that are turning us off. And a lot of that has to do with our nervous system. Do we feel safe? Do we feel like this person is safe for us? And again, to just really go on Emily's website, she has these worksheets that relate to a lot of these questions. It's an interesting thing to just fill them out. And, whatever your situation is, and I don't want to feed into that couple centric, it's not really sex if it's not in a couple situation, because that's not the case for many of us. We have this sexual experience and our sexual mechanisms and processes that change throughout our life. And some of them are internal, they're with ourselves, and some of them are with other people. So let's look at what is a conducive content. And so she's saying it's a blend of erotic and romantic cues, low stress, and high affection. So let's just sit with each of these, and you can just look at them on the screen. And you can make notes about this, or you can go into the Come As You Are worksheets, and they're all there as well. So, what is it that increases your pleasure, that context for pleasure? Is it feeling a sense of love? It's the love and emotional bonding cues are one area. Love, security, commitment, emotional closeness. So sometimes that is really, if you're in a partnership, if you have that or don't have that, it has a big impact on whether or not you feel like having sex or whether you feel like making love. And some of these have to do with the offs as well. And some of them have to do with just our general relationship. If you feel like your partner or partners really care about you and really pay attention to you, not just when they want to have sex, but other times as well. But also if you feel like you're accepted by your partner. Do you feel comfortable making whatever sounds you make, being really enthusiastic or maybe not as enthusiastic if you're a little bit slower to warm up? Do you feel like you're accepted? Just take a moment to sense into all of that. And these can really be relating to partnerships with others or partnership with ourselves as well, not to leave that part out. And then some people have a lot of sensitivity and arousal through sexy movies or stories. Thinking about date night might be leading to sex. Some people are very spontaneous arousal, she calls it, compared to that responsive arousal where we actually have to start going into the process. Maybe you start with a massage or something to kind of get yourself onto that arousal. Is that something that you bring in, that you like, that kind of turns you off? What's your sense of explicit or erotic cues? And then visual and proximity cues. So it's been a long time since I went to a club, and especially looking for a potential partner. We all experience on some level. Some people don't experience it very often, or maybe not at all. That's true. But I know for myself, even being single and not really particularly looking for a partner, sometimes you'll just see somebody that seems attractive. We have that kind of and just the visual or proximity clues. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a sexual component to that. It might mean more, it can also mean that you like certain things about that person. Maybe you like the way their body language is, or the way they look. It also could be maybe you like their qualities. They seem really engaged and honest, and there's something about them that kind of pulls you in. And so all of these are not good, bad. All of these are just, yeah, that really is something that's important to me and important in this context, or not so much. And then the romantic and implicit cues. Now, this is again a little bit more on the responsive arousal than the spontaneous arousal side. So it's once you're dancing closely, or for your massage or other intimate touch, a nice smell, having fun together. How does that fit into your context? Now let's move to just thinking about or bringing forward a sexy experience from the past. And what, in particular, what made it positive for you and what was inhibiting or put the brakes on for you. And again, Emily has this organized into different sections. If you go to her website and do the worksheets, there's areas, there's a whole section on what made it positive, another section on what was inhibiting, and then a plan for how you can bring that knowledge into creating a more conducive context. So, your mental and physical well being, which includes physical health, body image, anxiety, past sexual trauma, all of those things that either you're in the mood or not, you feel really accepted. Maybe you worry about sexual functioning. Maybe in this relationship, you don't worry about it at all. And what were the characteristics of your partner? And that could be physical, could be the relationship characteristics. Do you feel desired? Do they pay attention to you? Do you have the autonomy to say, I don't actually want to do that particular thing, or this is what communication needs to happen in order for me to really want to do this. Do you have the power in the relationship to be able to do that? And of course, our physical health, mental health, all of those impact it, as does the other person's. So if you think of a sexy experience, what are some of the dynamics that really made that particular situation work? And sometimes it's a setting. Some people are really excited by being away or in public. Seeing a partner do something that positive that's not related to sex could also be a turn on. Being kind to a child or an animal or working hard or whatever that might be. Sometimes there's so much pressure at home, things really open up when we're on vacation. Or it might be the opposite. What impact does setting have for you? And then as we get into the last section here on activities, this is an area where we're really susceptible to shame. Sometimes we might have a partner or we might have our own relationship around this where there's a lot of fantasy involved. And for some partners, they feel like, no, you shouldn't be using fantasy. I don't want you thinking about somebody else or fantasizing while we're making love. And other times partners will share that with each other. And it might be consensual sex play or it might be talking dirty. What are the body parts that were touched or not? Were you comfortable with that? Do you really like something? And are you comfortable asking for that? Do you really not want something? Talking with some younger women about this recently, I was really impressed by the level of communication that they have with their partners and the confidence. I deserve to have sexual pleasure from this. And why wouldn't I talk to them about what it is that I need? What do they need? How can we negotiate something that's going to really work for both of us? Let's just take another minute or so to kind of form a bigger picture of this. What is it that tends to make things really work for you? And notice your body, notice your breath. And notice if you're okay with whatever experience you have. For many people, we don't have a lot of positive experiences of sex, especially with other people, perhaps. Or maybe we did and now we don't anymore. We might have shame around something, or we might have a physical thing going on. Having this conditioning around what we should experience can be really damaging. If there's any kind of shaming, even if it's pretty subtle, see if you could let that go for a minute. Take some deeper breaths. If you're kind of slumped over in the shame posture, bring your chest open, look up, look around. See if you could offer yourself some kindness. And then let's move into the inquiry. Self compassion and attuned empathy are the foundation for this. If you wanted to work with one of these questions, you could go into it a little bit more deeply. We'll do this for, somewhere 7 or 8 minutes, something like that. So you'll have some time. Or you could come back to some of them. I'll just list them off and then I'll stop talking so that you can go in. And if you've already decided on one, you could mute me or just kind of in your mind let that go. Bring your attention to what you're working with. I have a varied, complicated history with sexual experience, pleasure, and arousal. And that's true to some extent for all of us. I have sex for many reasons. It is context dependent, affected by age, health, safety, power, and many other circumstances. And this is another one where we can feel particular shame around. Maybe you've had sex because you wanted affection. And as you look at that, you can see that it didn't really work out. But notice that we're all human and we have many reasons for what we do. See if you could allow that to be kind. And another possible inquiry is to look into sexual pleasure. Does it come easily? Do you often disconnect and feel uncomfortable? What is your situation around sexual pleasure? Just to be honest and authentic. And again, not shaming ourselves. There's reasons why all of this is as it is. For some, it comes easily, and for some, not so much. And this is a question that we could spend some time with. I am interested in opening more into enjoying sexual pleasure, noticing how true that feels. Or I'm not interested in opening more into enjoying sexual pleasure. So, on that continuum, we find ourselves on different places. And if you want to be somewhere on that continuum that you're not, if you're interested in opening more, but there's something holding you back, you could just say the statement, I am interested in opening more into enjoying sexual pleasure, and see what the response is in your body. Use it as a reverse inquiry. So let's sit with that, one of those areas, and perhaps that question in particular. Give yourself some time with it. As you're doing the inquiry, remain aware of your body, your breath. And especially if you're experiencing or maybe inquiring into this at different ages, just allow yourself to have empathy, experience that unconditional love and acceptance.